Compression. What is it? And why does it matter for people who do ASMR? I'll tell you right now, real quick, it probably doesn't matter, right? Compression generally sounds really great and works really well on loud stuff. And we do ASMR. We whisper. We're so quiet. And the odds that we actually need to compress an audio signal is very, 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 very small. So if you feel like you need to use compression, I'm going to explain what compression is, why you might want to use it, and then I'm going to show you how to use it and some editors that are most common for people who are editing ASMR. Sound like a plan? All right, let's draw a cute little graph, shall we? We'll do a little box here. And let's say that this is your waveform, right? You say something like, hello, and then you do a bunch of tapping. It's not the best waveform you've ever seen, but that doesn't matter. The main things of parts of a compressor that you're going to want to care about are the threshold and the ratio. You'll see things like attack and release, but you can leave those at the default settings for ASMR. They're not going to matter too much. So we've got threshold. The threshold will lower onto this waveform the peaks of the volume of what's coming in. And the lower the threshold, the more of your audio it's going to affect. All right. And then you have the ratio, which is how much after a peak, right? So let's say you set your threshold there, right? Anything that goes above that line is going to be affected 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, and that's what that ratio means, right? So let's say you set a ratio of 3 to 1. Then you would take all the peaks going over and you divide them into a third, and any audio that goes over that threshold is being cut into a third, right? So that would be kind of like if it was 1 to 1, it wouldn't be doing anything, no compressing. If it was 2 to 1, you would cut those in half, but we're doing 3 to 1, so it's kind of like it's keeping your audio, kind of capping it at about a third of the height. 4 to 1's even lower, 5 to 1's even lower, and then when you get into like 10, 20, that's when you're starting to do something more like limiting, which is basically saying your audio, once it hits that threshold, is not going to go any higher, right? It's like, you can think of it like a brick wall, just, and then this is all fine, and then, but you see, the thing is, in ASMR, so much of these peaks, you kind of want them to be uncompressed. You want the full volume and impact of like tapping and all that. And you can play around with compression to see what effect it has on it. But for the most part, I think leaving things uncompressed is kind of a better way to go. Because the thing to keep in mind is when you compress something, it gets quieter, right? And then when you raise the volume to make up for the fact that you cut the volume a little bit, it not only brings up the volume of your waveforms, but let's say this is called the noise floor. Here's all the white noise and background noise in your apartment or your room or wherever you're recording. When you bring up the gain, that goes up too. So you're compressing and squashing your audio, and then you're raising it up, bringing up the noise with it. In ASMR, we don't like noise. Though I promise you, noise is not as big of a deal as you think it is. People don't mind it as much as you think they do. So that's your diagram. Now let's dive into, we'll start with Premiere and then we'll go into Reaper. If I can, I'll get a copy of Logic. We'll also look at DaVinci, and then maybe a couple more. And I'll show you how to compress with some examples in each of those. Let's go. Compression in Premiere. After you've got your audio brought into a sequence, whether it's attached to a video file or not, in this case it's just an audio file, find the loudest part of your clip. In this case it's a crinkly bag. And you want to go to the audio track mixer, which you can find up in Window, audio track mixer, and then the sequence that you want to be looking at, which in this case is just sequence 1. In this window, it might look more like this when you first bring it up, but you can click this tiny little arrow here, and then it'll allow you to insert plugins on the channels. And you go down to the drop-down menu, amplitude and compression, dynamics, and then double-click on dynamics right here. You want to turn on the compressor. You want a 3:1 ratio is a great place to start. And then hit play. And you can see it right here. That's how much it's lowering the volume of the peaks past the threshold. -6 to -8, I feel like is pretty good. You can really compress the crap out of it. Or it's not doing much. About right there is pretty good. And if you feel like that's making it too quiet, right, let's compare. With compression, without. It's a little quieter. You can do makeup gain. But remember, when you make up gain after compressing, it's going to bring up the noise floor with it. So just keep that in mind, all right? That is compression in Premiere. Compression in DaVinci Resolve. Once you've loaded up your audio file, or if it's a video file with audio attached to it, in this case it's just audio, you want to go to the Fairlight tab, and then you want to scroll to the loudest part of your video. In this case, it's this crinkly bag, right? And you go to the track here, A1, that's audio 1, the dynamics section, which is this crosshair, double click, and you'll see an option for an expander gate. You're never going to use that really in ASMR, so don't worry about it. There's a compressor, and there's a limiter, which you may or may not want to use. Now let's go ahead and turn on the compressor, and then we'll listen back to this audio. And then 3:1 ratio is a good place to start for ASMR. And you can see on this loud part about 4 to 5 dB is being compressed. We might want to lower the threshold here, which you can see in action there. I would say on average between 6 to 8 dB is a pretty good place for peaks in ASMR. So it's compressing when it gets really loud, but during other parts, like right here, it's not going to be doing much compression at all. And then if you want to turn on the limiter, you can go ahead and do that, and you can set the threshold wherever you want it. That's basically saying even after compressing, once audio hits a certain level, it will not go past that. And if you feel like in this section, compressing is making it too quiet, you can turn on makeup gain. Which you want to be careful about, because that will also bring up your noise floor. So any white noise or background noise will get turned up alongside that. That is compression in DaVinci. Compression in Reaper. What you want to do after you've loaded up your track here, all you got to do is click and drag into this gray area, and it'll load it up. Find the loudest part of your audio, and then you want to go to Effects, and you want to find Recomp. All you got to do is hit Add or double click in the white space, search. You can start searching for Recomp up here. It'll show up right there. Double click and it'll show up. Let's go to the loudest part, hit play. And we want the ratio here to be set to 3. 3:1 is usually a good place. You can type in 3, hit enter. And then what we'll do is we will lower the threshold until we start affecting the audio. And you can see it affecting it right here. And between 6 and 8 gain reduction for peaks, I think, is a good place. So about right there. And then if we go to a quieter spot, we're not really compressing much at all. A little bit like right there. But that feels pretty good. You don't have to worry about attack or release or anything like that. Knee size, you might see that sometimes. The knee is like the part where the compressor kicks in. Do you want it to be a sharp angle or more of a soft? Do you want the compressor to kick in softly or more just instantly? That's kind of what a knee is, right? So the bigger the knee, the softer the curve, so to speak. You can make up gain if you want to. So as you lower the threshold, it will automatically increase the audio level overall, but be careful with that because you will bring up the noise floor, right? And then limit output, that's just if you want to add a limiter to make sure it's not going to peak or anything or distort. And that is compression in Reaper. Compression in iMovie. This one's kind of tricky because there's not really like a compressor that's obvious, right? So once you've loaded up your movie, your audio, or your video file, go to the loudest part, go ahead and hit play. Get an idea of what the loudest part of your audio sounds like. And then all you can really do is hit the little speaker icon up there and hit auto. And you can see down here, it's doing something. And based on what's happening to the waveform, it seems like it's compression, some kind of limiting or compression. I can't really tell, but let's listen to both. The only thing I notice happening is you can really hear the background kick in, right? Let's go to a quieter part and listen to how much louder the background sound gets. Let's test the crinkles. So if you're using iMovie, don't do it. It's not going to make your ASMR sound better, all right? Just don't do it. Compression in Garageband. Now, once you've loaded up your audio track, go to the loudest part. Test the crinkles. All right, we've got some crinkles. Nice. Anytime you create a new track in GarageBand, you'll have this kind of plugin down here automatically added. It's got a compressor, EQ, sends, which kind of adds reverb or an ambience or delay to the track, which you can hear. But we're here for compression, right? So let's go ahead and turn it on and turn it up. We can see it's doing something, but like what? And what does amount mean? Is that the threshold? Is that the ratio? Well, if you go down to the bottom left here, you can see plugins, and here's where you can add other plugins that come with GarageBand. And you can also see a more detailed view of what the compressor is doing. So it turns out compressor threshold is the amount. You can see it's turning that knob down there when I move this slider. And the ratio, I believe by default is set to 1.8 or something. I would increase it to 3. And then I would take the gain and actually make that 0. We don't really want any makeup gain. Let's go ahead and hit play. and play with it to see what it's doing. If you can't really tell if it's compressing or not, if it's not like making a huge difference, just keep it turned off. All right, well, that's compression in GarageBand. Compression in Logic. Now, if you've got GarageBand's older sibling, what you want to do is click and drag your audio file onto a new track or import it, however you get audio into Logic, whatever you choose to do. Get to the loudest part, right? Because we want to compress the loudest parts. In this case, it's some crinkles. Go down here. Oh, first of all, channel mode. Make sure it's set to stereo. If it's set to mono, it's not going to play back in stereo, and also the plugins won't show an option for stereo. So you do want it in stereo mode. You want to go down to the plugin section right under that, and you want to add under dynamics, compressor, and then stereo. Go ahead and click on it right there. And now we're looking at the compressor. Go ahead and hit play. And we can see it's already doing a little bit of compressing. Now, I think 3:1 is a great ratio for ASMR, but experiment, increase it, decrease it, whatever your heart desires. You can have meter mode, which is kind of old school, or graph mode. And you can see in real time it's reducing those peaks in real time. And this is also, side note, a great place to see what a knee is, right? If you increase or decrease the knee, see how that makes where the compressor kicks in, soft or hard. I think where the default setting is pretty good. Now, in meter mode, we can see that it's floating -4, right? I think between -6 and -8 is a great place for ASMR. So let's lower the threshold. And on average, I think that was a little bit better, right? You can do makeup gain, but remember that's going to bring up the noise floor with it, so be careful. You can also turn on the limiter if you want to, just to make absolutely sure there's not going to be any peaking, which might cause distortion. You'll notice across the top 7 different buttons. Now, this does more than just make the compressor look cooler or add different colors, right? Each of these is actually modeling a classic compressor from the analog world. I'm not going to go over which one each one is emulating, but you can Google that if you want to and pick which one you think sounds the best. That, in a nutshell, is compression in Logic. Compression in Audacity. Now, once you've dragged in your audio file and you've got it ready to apply compression to, what you want to do is go to the loudest part, and we're going to apply compression just to that little bit of loud part, and we're going to find what setting works the best and then apply that to the whole track. All right, so let's see what it sounds like before compression. Let's test the crinkles. All right, we'll select that short little bit there, go to Effect, Compressor, and let's just try the default settings, right? I mean, the tricky and part of Audacity and kind of the downside is you can't adjust the settings in real time and hear what they're doing. You have to apply the effect, see if you liked it, undo it, redo it until you find something that works. Thankfully, I think the default settings in Audacity are okay for ASMR. If anything, take the noise floor down to like -70 just to make sure it's not adding an increase to noise that we don't want there. Let's hit preview. All right, cool. Let's try lowering the threshold. I can certainly hear that was quieter, but not necessarily better. So let's bring that back up. And let's see what happens if we raise the noise floor. Didn't make it any better. I'll tell you this much. If you're making ASMR and you're editing your audio in Audacity, don't worry about compression. I just wouldn't do it, okay? And if you do it, I would actually, instead of doing compression, I would do limiting, okay? So you would want to go to Effect and then down to Limiter, which you might need to add. You go to Add, Remove Plugins, and you might need to add it post. I'm not sure if it's there. I don't remember if it's there by default. But limiter, you want a hard limiter for sure. Limit to -1 dB, yes. And that's totally fine. Just this default, that'll work, right? So we can go ahead, we can select everything, Effect, Limiter, and this is just gonna make sure that it's not gonna distort, or there's not going to be any peaks that go too high or too loud and they're going to distort. So just hit OK, and you're probably not going to see much of anything happen. It's just going to apply a limiter. But let's go ahead and listen back. So that's after the limiter. And if I undo it and do again, the limiter made it slightly louder overall, but limiting might make sense in Audacity. Compression, it's not that great. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Audacity. I think compression is so much better if you can adjust it in real time and really hear what it's doing, so you can make a decision about the effects that you're applying to your audio. It's so much more of a pain in the butt when you have to do this trial and error kind of thing, So check out Reaper. You can do compression in that in real time, and it's got a really long trial, and then it only costs $60. So, I mean, try Reaper. All right, you stuck around to the end for whatever reason, and I appreciate you, and I hope that you found this video useful. And feel free in the comments to ask any other questions about compression. I'll be happy to answer them, and hopefully I can do something again like this soon with EQ. See you next time.